I was affected by my divorce before I was divorced. The few years leading up to the divorce was some of the darkest times of my life because you're married for 2 decades. I met her in college. My entire adult life was built with her and my family, and I felt like I was a shell of a person. Unlike a lot of people, I went through all those stages
Hmm.
before the actual divorce. Once we got
Sure.
to that point, I had already kind of suffered and died and was ready
Mm.
to rebuild.
Seth Prezant, absolutely delighted to have you on the show, the Purpose Led Leadership podcast. We met on the highest freestanding mountain in the world and the highest freestanding mountain in Africa. Not a bad place to meet somebody. Thrilled to have you on. Before we get into it, just tell the audience who Seth is.
Seth is this guy who when I was 17 years old, I saved a woman in Egypt. No joke. Um, I was on a horse riding around Giza looking at the pyramids, and I saw this blonde on a horse in the distance, and she's screaming and she has no control of the horse and she looks like she's slipping, she's falling. So this is who Seth is. Seth, with his long hair back then, like Lawrence of Olivia, I'm like, yeah, I got that horse going. I'm galloping towards her. I'm just feeling like a god in Egypt, and here's this blonde, and I'm gonna save her, and I'm so excited. And as I get closer, I'm getting really close, and I realize, um, she was falling off this horse, and I was like, this isn't a movie. Like I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but I managed to get up right beside her, grab her on the side, pull her off her horse, saved her. And yeah, that's who Seth is. He is a saver of falling women off horses.
Wow, that is some introduction. I'm also interested in how long the hair was.
It was about 3 inches past my shoulder back then.
Wow,
So,
wow.
yeah, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So,
Absolutely amazing. That is some feat to actually, the courage to do that. What was the
yeah.
woman's reaction? Can I ask?
Let's just be clear to your audience. There was no courage there. This was all about getting in the good graces of a beautiful blonde being 17 years old. Um, you know what? It was interesting. I've always been adventurous, not to a point where I was risking my life or limbs in an
Mm.
unnecessary and irresponsible way. But I've always tried to live life, I guess, from an early age to the fullest. And I whenever I saw an opportunity to just do something adventurous and exciting, I run
Yeah.
towards it. So that's a little bit about who Seth is. But I think what you were asking is Seth. You were asking a little bit more about Seth, the CEO and founder of Hike Your Sales.
Well, Seth the
Yeah,
man, the CEO is a title, isn't it? I want to delve deep
yeah.
into that. But on that point, then, so let's talk about the journey of Seth, because
Mhm.
obviously, as you say, you've been a CEO, you're a father. Paint us a picture, if you like, kind of since school to how you've arrived to what you're doing now.
I think I've always gravitated towards a couple things since school. I've gravitated towards adventure. I've gravitated towards kindness. Always surrounding myself with people who are kind and feeling like I have to take chances because we only get this one life. Unfortunately, my parents got sick when I was quite young, and it taught me some very good lessons that, life is really precious. We don't typically learn that
Mm.
till much later in life. I unfortunately learned that, or fortunately learned that early on, and just never wanted to ruin or waste a moment of that. And that was since school. Now, my teachers will argue against that. They will say I wasted a lot of time, didn't necessarily do the work I was supposed to do, but I didn't want to just go home and do homework. I wanted to live life. So
Yeah. I mean, having got to know you on that mountain, certainly adventure speaks for itself. I mean, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro is an adventure, but your kindness and your generosity and your warmth really shone through. And I want to talk to you about that because obviously, what you're doing now is about sales, and I think I'd like to link empathy, kindness, and those kind of traits to sales. Not a lot of people correlate with that. Why don't we just jump into that point?
sure.
Because I think the art of sales is quite a wide topic, and it's not always as straightforward as the loudest, the fastest, the best, is it? There's different ways to skin the cat, shall we say?
Yeah, I think the perception of sales for a long time has been that stereotypical used car salesman. And I'm glad that that has shifted over the last few years. This is not Wolf of Wall Street. Sales is not, there's I feel like you have the 1980s, 1990s sales and then the new sales. And uh, the, the top performing salespeople that I have known, trained, learned from in my career have all been ethical sellers. They've all been consultative. They care about helping find a solution. And if there's no solution, they're not going to try to make one up. They're there to help, they're there to share knowledge, and they're there to provide actual value. And you get to a point where once you've been really successful in sales,
Mm.
that's when you detach from the income, the
Yeah,
the commission check, because you know it will come if you're doing the right things. And that's
yeah,
when sales just becomes so fulfilling.
yeah. I think it's an art, isn't it? It's knowing kind of which hat to wear when and to whom. It's anticipating. It's matching. It's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it, isn't it? And tapping into that emotional side, um, kind of moving slightly away from the sales point, but staying with the kindness point. Now, obviously, you're my guest, but I want to talk to you about some experiences I've had to see if it correlates with the experiences you had. I've got a feeling it might, in terms of, I do see myself as a kind, empathetic human being. And I think that's served me well generally in my life. But also, I think that I've come unstuck a little bit with people, or me maybe allowing people to take advantage or manipulate or get something from me. And it's only really been the last few months, probably more so since Kilimanjaro, actually, where I've had the courage, the awareness, and the belief, and the self worth to actually really set some boundaries around some people that I actually love, to the point where I don't necessarily want to even have them in my life anymore. And I think it was a real challenge to do that. So I wanted to get your lens on boundary setting, kindness, that kind of area.
Sure. Well, first, the only Chris I know, the one that I met on the mountain 3 months ago, um,
Yeah.
is the kind Chris. I've only known that Chris, and it's hard to imagine any other Chris. You've been incredibly kind.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure and an honor, really, climbing with such a powerful force, such vulnerability. And I think when we're out there in the mountain, we shed layers of ego, and
Mm.
when we
Mm.
reveal our true selves to our own self, it's very powerful. I think we all looked at ourselves and said, "Wow, we like I like this version. I like this naked version of me, this shed
Yeah.
version of who I am up here, and we try and take that with us whenever we have
Mm.
these journeys. To answer your question, I think boundaries are extremely healthy for both parties. You know, people. I think it's human nature. I don't know if it's something that people think about consciously, but they will take as much as they can.
Hmm.
And for some people, that means taking your energy, taking your light. And some people, unfortunately, need your energy and light. They're in a dark place. They lack that energy, that spark. And it's okay to share, but it's not okay to give it to a point where you are depleted. And
Hmm.
when we're young, we just kind of open the gates for everyone to take. It's we want to be liked. We
Yeah.
want to feel good about having people in our lives. And I think there's a point when you feel it's okay to love more and care less. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is that I could there are people in my life I love dearly, but I have to care more about me and my well-being than about
Hmm.
their well-being. I love them. I
Mm.
just need to care less about whether they are happy if it
Yeah.
takes away from my own happiness.
I think that's right. I think where I've shifted the dial very, very, very recently actually is not necessarily taking it personally. And now that's very difficult to kind of comprehend with some people in terms of if someone's being, I don't know, disingenuous or trying to extract energy or something from you in an intentional way. Ordinarily, you'd think you'd take that personally, but the way I've managed that is almost take it as a compliment because they perceive you or me to have something that they haven't got, and
Yes.
it's just their way of going about their life, and it wouldn't serve me anyway to get resentful about them and judge them. I think it's almost a test to go, actually, how can I respond to this? How can I be a better person? And then use that as a fuel to educate yourself to be better. I always think that these types of people, whether it's a narcissist or whatever, is actually, if you do it correctly, can actually enhance your own kind of repertoire, if you like.
Yeah, I think being an example is the best thing you could be, because there are people that you can continue to give and give and give, but if
Mm,
their vessel does not have room, or their
yeah.
vessel is so broken that what they bring in just flows back out, then there's nothing you can do to help, but you are just giving all of
Mm,
yourself. So the to me, I've always felt like the best thing that you can
yeah.
do is really be an example. Be that light that people don't
Mm,
take from you, but that light
yeah.
that people see and want to gravitate towards.
And I think there's a way to do that because you can get offended, you can get upset, you can get angry, but I
Yeah.
think that if you can do it with a sense of empathy, with a sense of positivity,
Yeah.
but firm and fair, I think you're not only helping yourself, you're actually teaching them, and that's where you elevate. Whereas if you attack back and kind of two wrongs make a right, I actually think that you got to look at yourself in that. It doesn't matter what they've done; it's how you've responded.
Yes, and that control of emotion is the most difficult thing in the world. We're fighting against our primal lizard monkey
Yeah,
brains, and
yeah, man.
it really takes time and practice. I mean, I as as emotionally intelligent as I want to believe I'm no more than just a gecko on the wall. I
Hmm.
have to you this is where intentionality in every part of your life becomes so important. because if you don't
Yeah.
do things with intention, if you don't work with intention, if you don't love with intention, then you really
Hmm.
are allowing your natural instincts of emotions to control things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on, if I may, your parents and
Hmm.
some sort of difficult times with their illness. Can you expand on that for us, please?
Yeah, so I believe I was around 17 years old, and uh, my father came downstairs and he opened my door to the bedroom and he woke me up. He turned the light on, and when I saw him, I didn't recognize my father was a big guy, strong, just big, almost like a Harley Davidson looking
Yeah.
guy. And I had never seen my father have fear or anything, but like he was like a god, you know?
Mm.
And I just saw this man completely just diminished and fear in his eyes. And he looked at me, says, I don't know what's wrong, but your mom, something's wrong with your mom. He couldn't even speak. And it wound
Wow.
up that my mother had a stroke, and he just was um, it was very hard. And I had a brother. I have a brother who's 9 years younger, a sister three
Hmm.
years younger. So had to get them up and get my little brother dressed, and we were waiting for the paramedics to come. And thankfully, my mother survived the stroke, but she was never the same after that. Um, she was very limited in both physically and cognitively with the things that she was able to do for a long time, and that caused me to kind of grow up quite quickly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so
How
that
did that affect your father then as well?
it was interesting because the days that followed, my father would ask me questions like, "What's our zip code in the U.S.?" We have I guess our the code in
Yeah.
which we live in, and
Sure.
I was like, "What do you mean you don't know our zip code?" He's like, "No, I don't even. I know the address, but I don't know the zip code." And
Right.
how do you know how to work the dryer and the laundry?
Oh,
Like,
wow.
and
Right.
because my father, he owned a business, he worked. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. She took care of the kids in the home. And my father
Mm.
just all of a sudden he like realized like he didn't he wasn't these things were like new in his life, and he has three kids and he's trying to work and take care of, his business. He's
Mm.
looking after my mom. Um, so it was really strange, the dynamic, because I had never seen before my father vulnerable. I have never seen my father before where he just needed help, and it was both sad and encouraging at the same time, because I felt like this also was a time when we we probably connected on a different level that we never had connected
Mm.
before. Just
Mm.
seeing this strong figure vulnerable.
Mm.
um it certainly changed things for me and what it means to be a man, you know.
Right. That's really interesting because I believe vulnerability is an absolute strength. Just delve into that in a bit more detail then, because I'm sure before that incident, you may well have had a certain perception of your father. Um, but how do you link vulnerability to strength and sort of being a man or being a strong woman? What's the correlation there in your opinion?
I think being vulnerable and still showing up is where the if you're just vulnerable, then you're
Mm.
just vulnerable. But
Mm.
and if you're just strong without the vulnerability,
Yeah.
it's a facade. You're just a hard
Yes.
shell.
Mm.
So for me, I think it goes hand in hand, being vulnerable and and also being able to show up in an authentic way that you want to. Um, because I saw
Mm.
my father was able to do both. He was vulnerable. He But at the same time, he showed up. He still
Yeah.
worked. He still made sure we were fed. He
Yeah.
still put one foot in front of the other, and he did it with kindness. He did it with a little bit of fear. He did it with love, and
Mm.
that to me just encompassed what the strongest person looks like.
I think it's honesty, isn't it? And we're all human beings. We've all got mental health and challenges, and um, I just think it's important to kind of let your guard down sometimes and talk, particularly men, right? We don't talk enough, do we?
No, I think we're getting better at it. Uh, and Chris, I think you know I've looked back at some of your more recent shows, and I love the fact that it's because of men like you that men like me and other men are able to to be able to have these conversations, to be able to open up and
Yeah.
share. I know certainly from my father, my grandfather, you know, no one ever talked about mental health. It was not in their toolbox. They didn't talk about therapy. They didn't talk about these things. But I'm sure they still went through it because, like, you're a father, I'm a father. I mean, my father was a
Mm.
father, and I was not an easy kid. I was kind, I was adventurous, but man, was I a little terror. I was an asshole. I'm sure my father, I gave him a lot of mental health problems, me and my
Yeah.
siblings. But I think it's healthy. I think it's good that we're able to open up and and have these conversations, not just with each other, but
Mm.
just as part of our life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm 47 now. I'm a mental health first aider. I've done loads of work, as you've said, in mental health and that kind of stuff. And I've been very open about my own mental health. I feel as if I'm in a good spot at the moment. But I do recall pretty much very close to the Kilimanjaro trip. I was suffering then. And also about a year ago, I remember taking my kids to the forest and being in all sorts of bother mentally. And I've got through that. And I'll happily talk in a bit more detail about that. But I want to hear from you in terms of the last time you felt your mental health was challenging you, or your vulnerability, and what that felt like and how you got through that potentially.
You know, it, it creeps up on me every once in a while. There are things that surface, and I used to kind of push them aside, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and now I kind of do what I do in life every day. I face them head on. I go towards them because they're there for a reason. I really feel like everything we have, we feel there's a purpose for them. They're
Yeah.
for us. Even the bad things, they are there. You know,
Hmm.
whether you're spiritual or religious or you believe in God or not, the universe. I believe that all these things happen for a reason, and we don't always know why.
Mm.
We don't always get the memo from God. We're not on his
Yeah.
email list, and and we don't always get like, well, here's why I'm doing this, and we may never know. But there is something
Yeah.
about understanding, like, okay, I'm feeling this way for a reason. And for me, I think my daughter, I saw her this past weekend, and my the love of my life, my my daughter and my son, we were out hiking in Georgia, and it was so beautiful, and we were right by this river, and my daughter out of nowhere asked me, "Dad, just curious, like where, you ever think about like where would you like to be buried?" Talk
Wow.
about mental health. I mean, I was like,
Yeah.
what? And she's like, no, I'm just like thinking, and like, and I was like, all of a sudden, I had this kind of panic inside me, not about death, but wow, I cannot leave my kids with this burden. Like, I'm
Mm.
54 and
Mhm.
God willing, I have many, 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 many more years. But
Yeah.
you know what? I just lost a dear friend. I just 4 days ago. Um, it was my age, and
Wow.
you just never know. And so
No.
my kind of the things I deal with mentally come and go. And the last one I
Yeah.
had was a little bit of this panic, like I need to get everything prepared. I need to because I used to
Mm.
be someone
Mm.
who needed to control everything.
Sure.
And I've worked so hard on that. And when that surfaces again, where I'm in a panic, like I need to gain control, I do
Yeah.
feel this sense of just unraveling. And that that tells me, okay, I need to, this is a trigger. I need to step back. I don't need to plan everything. I don't need to have all the
Mm.
answers. I don't need to be right. I don't need to have it
Mm.
all figured out. I don't. I'm a
Yeah.
human being. I will do
Yeah.
the best that I can. But yeah,
Mm.
this just happened 2 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's a really good um, perspective in terms of, as you say, it can creep up on you. You know, things can get thrown your way. I think as we go along our journey, as we get older and get wiser, we tend to usually be able to manage things better each time because we learn from the previous times. But fundamentally, for me, usually it's not one thing. It's normally to do with me either pushing myself too hard, trying to people please, not looking after myself with my health, my fitness, my diet. And I think my mental health is in a really strong place at the moment, and I can only put that down to self love. What I mean by that is putting myself first in a way where I can now serve my clients, my friends, my family, because I'm working out, I'm eating well, and kind of like, but I've never really had the wherewithal or belief that I could and I should put myself first because of my past. But also, I can't blame my past. I'm still in control of that. So what I'm trying to say, probably quite badly there, I think, look, it's a journey, right? And it takes time. And I think patience is a wonderful thing. I'm 47, you're 54, I think you said. And I think that
Yeah.
I just feel in terms of the age factor, right? I feel we're old enough to know most things and still young enough to do most things. And I think this whole middle age thing is a very difficult time for men and for women, but also it can be a really, really exciting time because, we've got all these experiences and, we can utilize them in the right way as well, right?
Yeah. About 4 or 5 years ago, wait, 4 or 5 years, so about 4 or 5 years ago, this is going to be hard to say. I went to my 30-year high school reunion.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so. But I mean, yes, some of the best moments of my life when my children were born and all this stuff. But the truth is, it was one of the best days of my life. And the reason was, and I'm still very close with a lot of my high school friends, not just like on
Hmm.
Facebook, social media, but like we stay connected. And the reason to me it was so beautiful was that, you know, when you're young, you have a lot of, you want to put this persona on, and you want to show you're successful. You want to show that, everything is good in your
Mm.
life. You don't want to show vulnerability. And by the time we hit our 30-year reunion and we're all together, there's not a person in that room that has not suffered a loss. There's not a person in that room that has not experienced just family trauma. There's not a person in that room who has not, had their ups and downs with business or finances. There's not a person in that room
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
has not dealt with some mental illness in some way. And
Hmm.
because of that, it was almost like we were on this nude beach where everyone was just nude. There, no one
Yeah,
had
right.
clothes on. We were all equal. Everyone
Mm. Mm.
was just themselves, and it was
Yeah.
beautiful because you're connecting with the people from so many years ago that before they had all this ego,
Yeah.
before they had this persona, they were just your
Mm.
they were just your mate.
That's a really good example there, and I relate that to the Kilimanjaro thing. So before I climbed Kilimanjaro, I didn't think I was that much of a judgmental person. I didn't necessarily think I was biased towards certain types of people, but it really enabled me to see people in a different light. As you know, there was different characters in there. There was CEOs. There was all sorts of different people, different ages, and I just felt completely equal, and everyone. I just felt, and it was such a transformational experience for me in terms of I get social anxiety, believe it or not, even though I've been a CEO, I've done all these things,
Yeah.
but I just felt accepted and kind of like I just felt this warmth around. Whereas before, and even in the first couple of days, I was judging people by what my perceived status was of them. So one of the biggest transformations for me was that, and I think when you get to that point where you're not judging as much, or I don't think you can ever not judge, but I think the answers always lie within anyway, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I gotta share with you. That's the word I hate most is judgment. I hate
Hmm.
that because people look at that and say, "Oh, you're judging." Well, judging is not just natural; it's kind of healthy. It
Yeah,
keeps us safe. I think where we take that judgment is more important. Like we're all judging, but what we
mm,
do with that judgment is it's kind of like I could be upset. What do I do with my feelings? I could sit back and let myself just kind of like process things, or I could react and, jump around, scream and yell.
yeah,
So I think we need to be able to forgive ourselves for being human and look at the
yeah,
way that we show up. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier. I know this is such a simple answer, but whenever I don't feel enough, the answer that I give myself is, Seth, you are enough. That's it. You
yes,
are enough. We
mm,
in this strange place, we are both perfect and yet have the ability to constantly improve. But we are perfect right
yes,
here, right now. We are
yes,
perfect. And it's hard. The concept is hard. How could we be perfect and still have room to grow, to learn?
yeah,
But I really believe that when you get to that point, when you believe that you are enough
yes, yes,
and are still open to learn and grow and receive,
yeah,
that is when life
yeah, man,
changes.
yeah. That's the kind of like the best of both worlds, isn't it? It's being content, but also having the ambition to grow, but not in a greedy way, just in almost a curious way. And
And that's my one of my favorite words, curiosity.
yeah,
Yeah. So funny. My
absolutely.
the word I hate the most is judgment,
Hmm.
and
There
yet
we
the
go.
word I love the most is curiosity.
I think that's such a strong leadership trait, isn't it? Or human trait around. It's almost the opposite to judgment, isn't it? Being curious about instead of making an opinion or judgment on it. Some of the I think moving to leadership, some of the best leaders are the ones that you tend to underestimate. I think. Um, I want to jump back to you mentioned family trauma a little
Mhm.
bit, and I think all families have traumas. I want to continue the journey of kind of your parents and how that played out, but also your own relationships as well, like marriages and relationships with your son and your daughter as well.
Yeah.
Talk to us a bit more about those areas, if that's okay.
Yeah. So the trauma did not stop with my mother having a stroke a few years later. My father suffered a massive heart attack and it was literally flatlined, had to be brought back to life with the, the little shocker things.
Wow. Was
And
that quite soon after your mother?
it
Right.
was. And it was funny because, not funny, but it wasn't until years later in, when I was working with a therapist through things, that I even realized that this played a role in my life. I never gave it thought back then. I was the
Mm.
oldest son.
Mm.
I had parents that were sick. It was something I just jumped in. I quickly became mom, um, and took control. And I think that throughout my life, without recognizing it, I showed up as the parent
Yes.
in so
Yes.
many ways, and it was both good and not good, because showing up as a parent, you get that sense of caring, that sense of, of nurturing, but being a
Mm.
parent could also be annoying as hell. And when you show up as a leader, as a parent, sometimes you could show up as that annoying parent. Sometimes you could
Yeah.
make people feel like
Mhm.
a child. Sometimes you could take on responsibilities that don't belong to you, but you feel like it does. So that took me a long time. Actually, it didn't take me a long time. It was a long time before I even recognized that that was showing up in my life. And then it took me
Mhm.
even a longer time to kind of course correct
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you think, or how has it affected you that both parents having, um, that kind of trauma, you then having to probably try and grieve that, also then step up and be this role model as well. It must have really affected you. How did it play out in terms? Did it make you more vulnerable, or kind of, yeah? Talk to us about that.
Actually, back then, no, it was the opposite.
The other
It
way.
made me,
Mm.
um, it made me desire control,
Sure.
because
Right.
life had pulled the rug underneath me. So I
Mm.
needed to control the things that I felt I could control. It was important for me to have order in my life. It was important for me to have answers. It was important for me um, to find stability, and that
Mm.
fought against that wild kid that wanted the adventure.
Yeah.
But I think in the end it played out, because it pulled me back a little bit when I wanted to do stupid boy things. It
Mm.
grounded me and said, "Wait, maybe this isn't a good idea, because if something happens to you, who's going to be there for your brother and sister?" Um, but it also pushed me. So it pulled me back in good ways, and it pushed me in good ways. It pushed
Mm.
me to succeed. Failure was, I mean, it's just so right that failure is not an option. It certainly was
Mm.
not for me.
So the control aspect, I think this is quite a fairly common thing with people. Certainly myself, I have in the past been a bit of a control freak. Um, the reaction to what happened to your parents, you then becoming over controlling. How did that play out in your relationship? Because you are married or have been married, is that correct?
I was married for 21 years. I've been divorced for about 7, I think,
Okay.
and currently in a long-term, uh, loving and very healthy relationship with this incredible woman that
Wow.
I don't know if years ago I would be in a place to be able to receive and honor her the way she deserves, because things do play out in your life, not just in the relationship with with your spouse, but it plays out with your children. You got an
Mm.
opportunity to meet my son, and on the mountain,
Yeah,
he and
absolutely.
I, for the most part, you saw, father and son loving relationship. But I
Yeah.
mean, we've grappled. I mean, we've gotten a little physical before, not in a crazy way, but
Yeah.
um, we didn't always have the best relationship. And you even saw, I don't know if there was a joke on Kilimanjaro. My son's 24, and when you're on Mount Kilimanjaro, you're extremely high up. You're right there on the equator, and even though it can get extremely cold, that sun could beat down on you and destroy you. I mean, you were red as a lobster at one point.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
but people, I kept telling my son, "Hey, did you put on enough sunblock? Did you
Yeah,
put on
yeah,
enough sunblock?" And
yeah. I remember that.
finally, someone on the I forgot who it was, but someone's like, "He's 24 years old. Leave him
Leave him
alone.
alone, man.
Leave him alone." But that's where
Yeah.
that parental part of me keeps showing
Mm,
up. And
mm,
it's both good because I'm caring, but it's also like,
mm.
come on, Seth, pull back a little bit.
So I want to touch on that, but going back to what you said about the relationship with your wife and how you showed up
Mm-hmm.
in that relationship versus your ability now to show up and honor your new relationship.
Yeah.
What are the fundamental differences between that Seth, the old Seth, and the new Seth? Seth, would you say?
So the old Seth was I got it. I'll take care of it. I'll do it. Part of it was because I felt like no one can do it as well as I can.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
got it. I'm going to control it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to show that I'm the guy, right? I'm your
yeah.
man. I'm the guy. I'm going to show up. I'm going to take care of business. And what ultimately happened was over many years, I looked back and said, wow, why is everything on me? I'm the one doing everything, holding up everything, planning everything. I'm the one. And,
Mm,
and it's kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you're holding, you don't want to carry all the bags, right? Like you don't want to take like 5 trips. So you
yeah, of
take all the bags
course.
in your hand and you could hold
Yeah,
it. You could hold it for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe, 5 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilos, each
yeah.
one. But you hold that for long enough and your arms are going to start getting really heavy
Mm,
and it's going to
mm,
start to hurt. And that's what was happening. I was holding everything on my own. And then when I looked at my ex-wife and like, hey, can I get some help here? It was like, whoa, I never needed to do this before. I
yeah,
had kind of taken and shaped the relationship in a way where I took it all on myself. And at the
hmm,
end, I felt
yeah.
like I was by myself, even though I was married.
See, this hits home. Actually, I think I've been exactly the same in other relationships where I want the control, I want to be the man, I want to do everything else, but then I get pissed off when they don't help me. In the end, it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the difference between then and now, I mean, a ton of differences, but one of the big ones is that I don't feel like showing up like that as a man serves the relationship. So now
Hmm.
I'm it's a really wonderful partnership. And I'm not
Mm,
only okay with
mm,
with my partner doing things, I'm okay with
yeah,
her doing it her way.
yeah,
I would not have been okay with that because before there was only one way to do things
yeah,
right. Now I look and say my answer is my way. It could be a good way. It might be the right way, but it
yeah.
also might not be the best way. And if it's not my way, that's okay too.
See, see, this is emotional intelligence, but I think this is being a man or being an adult. It works both ways, whether you're a man or a woman. I think it's understanding that sometimes it's best to let things go. Sometimes it's best to let the partner do that. She or he's not going to think anything. I think it's just about removing the ego, man. And actually, if your female partner needs to be strong and almost play the masculine person for a while or two, that's okay, and vice versa. I don't necessarily conform to the fact that I'm a man. I have to do. Obviously, we have a role to play. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important to have that, but and every relationship is different. But I think sometimes, you need a strong woman, and sometimes a woman needs a strong man, and sometimes, it's a mixture of all everything.
Yeah, I think we all have. I truly believe we all have both male and female energy, and
Hmm.
some people have a little bit more male, some people have more female energy, and it shows up at different
Mm.
times.
Mm.
And it's kind of like there's a dimmer, and we
Yeah.
don't always get to control it. But like if you're driving in the car and you hear just kind of a nice song that feels
Yeah.
good, it's different than if you hear the theme of Rocky. That energy is going to change.
Mm. Mm. What about the aspect of tough love? What I mean by that is that I think a healthy relationship, there's conflict, there's healthy conflict in healthy relationships. As in, I think your partner should be challenged and be able to be challenged as well. And I think I've fallen foul of that before, been quite defensive of stuff. And I think that if you're always agreeing with each other, I think that's all great, but that's bullshit, isn't it? But if you're always fighting, that's too much. I think it's a communication is a big thing, right?
I think it's the biggest thing. It is because tough love is funny. The concept of tough love, I like it. Um, how you communicate that tough love, I think, makes a difference whether or not it's effective or not. So
Yeah.
let's go back. I know you ran a couple companies. You've run
Hmm.
staffing companies, staffing agencies,
Absolutely.
and there are times we need to hold our people accountable for doing the activity that we know
Yeah.
produces results. We can show tough love in many ways, but doing tough love with empathy
Mm. Mm.
is very different than doing tough love the way that maybe you and I received
Yeah.
it growing up. And
Mm.
you know, some people like that kick in the butt.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but everyone's different. And I think some people who need that kick in the butt,
Yeah, man.
even if you kick them right in the ass, if they're not in a place where they could receive it at that moment, then you're
Mm.
just kicking their ass. That's all
Yeah.
you're doing.
Yeah. It's not gonna change their uh, attitude or belief towards it. You got to win their hearts and minds. Um,
No.
but a good leader knows which hat to wear, when, and to whom. Absolutely.
And I've got to tell you, a good leader should, in theory, know. But I consider myself. I would like to consider myself a good leader, but I didn't
Hmm.
always know. We're also, even as
Yeah.
leaders, we're human beings, and being a leader, we
Yeah.
we we have no greater mind control or insight. And there are times when I thought I was showing up in the right way, and I was way off. I mean, those are the
Yeah.
times whew, I because as a leader, the responsibility that you have is so great. And when you fall, when you trip, when you screw it up,
Yeah.
it really stings because you you're affecting someone in ways that you don't even imagine.
Mm.
So yeah.
So, so you mentioned some of the challenges you had with Sam, your son, as a parent, and
Mhm.
can you give us some examples of that in terms of like where you might have fucked up yourself, and being a parent is not a straightforward situation sometimes, is it?
No, the best description I heard was being a parent is like nailing jello to a wall.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many examples of how I did not show up for both my kids, and um, it's almost like I can't think of one. That's how much of a screw up I've been as a father. If you ask Sam, I'm sure he has a running list of all the ways I was not a perfect dad. Um, but it all went back to me not being not allowing myself to show my kids that I'm a person. I felt like I needed
Yeah.
to show that I was a strong
Right.
father instead of
Yeah.
showing that I was a caring person and
Yeah.
that I'm doing my best. Doing my best was not good enough. I had to have all the answers. But
Mm.
kids know you don't have all the answers. And
Mm.
um, it was tough. I mean, my daughter and my son are very different.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're a father and you can't in that moment be a different father to two different kids because you're one
No.
person. And in the moment you get back from work and you had a bad day and something might have happened and you're dealing with
Yeah.
something with your spouse, and then one kid's acting one way and another kid's acting another way, and emotional intelligence doesn't happen
No.
always when you need it, you know?
I think that's right. I think I've got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I think that generally I firmly believe that they look up to me and I'm the hero, I'm daddy, and this, that, and the other. But I think it's really important to be that human person and get them to see that sometimes daddy gets it wrong and sometimes daddy unfortunately does shout. And my temper, my temperament is so much better than what it was. I've also got a 23 or 24-year-old son now, that I don't see necessarily, and I'm a much better parent now than what I was back then. A little example. My son yesterday helped me put some laptop lights on my laptop, and he set it all up for me. And he spent an hour doing it, and I just realised this morning I didn't thank him for it. I dismissed him, and now I'm feeling really guilty. But what I'm trying to say there is that sometimes, I think as long as you now, I think the bigger impact is me going to go back and I'm going to call him up in a minute and say, I'm really sorry I didn't thank you for doing that. And just kind of like, there's so many things you can teach your children by understanding the importance of being in tune with their feelings, basically. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I used to think that, man, I screwed up or I screwed up again,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until going back to giving yourself permission to being like, okay, this is part of it. What would it mean if I went to my son and said, I didn't like the way I showed up. I'm sorry.
Love
I,
that.
I mean, and
Yeah.
the first time that I
Yes.
recall doing that, I don't know why it was the worst, scariest thing in the world to apologize
Mm,
to your son who you love.
totally
Why
agree.
was it the most frightening thing in the world?
Yeah.
And when you sit back and absorb it, you realize why. It's the vulnerability. It's the, well, wait, if then that
Yeah.
means I'm not.
That's the lesson. That you can be a great father, you can be flawless, you can be strong and be stoic, but the lesson is actually admitting and conceding. Because kids, they hardly ever say sorry. They never admit they're wrong. They always want to win a game of football. They always want to do, and
Yeah,
actually teaching them. Actually, I've got to say, Chester, Daddy got that wrong. I want to say I'm very sorry to you, and kind of like that's the power. I think. You know.
it is. And look, you can't turn back things, but you
No.
certainly can move forward. And I've shared with my kids the number of ways that I wish I never showed up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
said, I hope I didn't screw you up too much. I hope I'm not going to cost you too much money in therapy when you're adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you could just show up today. I mean, I remember, Chris, I am not kidding you. Years ago, when I started my I call it, like we all call it the journey, right? I started my journey and
Yeah.
looking inward and seeing who I was and trying to see where I want to go.
Mm.
I remember, and no one told me to do it. I just remember, like, you know what? Who did I hurt that I remember? Who did I hurt? Who did I
Mm.
show up that I didn't
Mm.
like? And I remember I called my she was a girlfriend in 10th grade, and I adored her. She was so sweet, and the way I broke up with her was so shitty.
Yeah.
And I called her up. I found her number and I called her up and I'm like, hey, and this is, like I said, this is like almost like 20 something years later. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to tell you I'm sorry. I
Mm.
broke up with you in a really shitty way, and I know we were only in 10th grade, but
Yeah.
like it's still the fact that if
Sure.
I recognize it and think about that, I can't imagine you. And she played it off like,
Yeah. Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
I don't even remember, and don't worry. But there was a part that I felt like she did, and
Mm.
it was also not just me apologizing to her, but it was
Apologizing to
also
yourself.
it was saying, Seth,
Mm.
it's okay. You're
Mm.
not perfect, but what's good is that
Mm.
tomorrow
Mm. Mm.
I have an opportunity to show up in a better way.
Can you tell me about how affected you were by your divorce?
My I was affected by my divorce before I was divorced, and the few years leading up to the divorce was some of the darkest times of my life, because you're married for 2 decades. I met her in college. My entire adult life was built with her and my family, and no one was divorced in my family. Like, we were just like, you don't get divorced. You just kind of make things work. And I mean, I felt like I was a shell of a person, and food didn't taste right. I didn't enjoy things. There was very few things I enjoyed. A
Yeah.
lot of it was a fog. But unlike a lot of people, I went through all those stages
Mm-hmm.
before the actual divorce. Once we got
Sure.
to that point, I had already kind of suffered and died and was ready to
Mm.
rebuild. And the exciting part was finding out who the hell Seth is, single adult
Yeah.
Seth, because I didn't know
Yeah.
who Seth was as an individual for many years. And that journey
Mm.
was so exciting and scary at the same time. I remember in therapy
Mm.
telling my therapist and saying, my biggest problem with being alone right now is, what happens if I don't like Seth? What happens if he's a complete asshole? What happens if he's someone that I despise? And I was scared that I would not like the person I was. And her answer was, what happens if you really like him?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, we just have to get on with it and figure it out. And
Mm.
that journey was wonderful, because I got to meet someone in a way that I've never known myself before.
So, is this a fairly new relationship you're in now? Then, can I ask? Or
Um, the relationship I'm in is coming up on 4 years,
wow.
um, and we, without saying too much, this is my person. This is my forever,
Wow.
and it's kind of cool when you're at this stage of your life
Mm.
and you know what you don't like, you know what you don't want, and you know what you
Yeah.
do want, you know what you like, you have a certain
Sure.
sense of certainty about things.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's a really great place to be. It feels good and different
Yeah.
to be in love at this age.
I
It's
mean, that's really. I can't think of a better word. Exciting, because to divorce in your 50s, divorce at any age isn't great, but there must have been a period, for, year 2 or 3 that was like doubting, and I think that probably being single for a couple of years or 3 years or whatever it might have been was probably one of the best things that could have happened to you. Again, I'm guessing.
It was in many ways. I went out and I I dated a lot, and part of it was just I was married 21 years, right? So here's this guy who's like
Fill your boots. Yeah.
free. You know, I mean, but at the same time, every person that I went on a date with, I felt like I was learning a little bit more about myself. I had maybe out of all the dates in 3, 4 years of dating, I can't even think of more than two that were like not good dates. They were all good dates because
Okay.
I got to learn
Yeah.
about myself. I got to learn about other people. I got to experience things. I looked at every date as like this blessing, where I got closer and closer, not to another person, but closer and closer to myself.
Right.
And it was a long time before I was really ready to be in a place where I could feel like, all right, I now want a relationship again. Not because I want it, because I'm ready for it.
Ready. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I asked like my therapist, I'm like, how do I know when I'm ready? And she's like, how do you define porn? You just know it when you see it.
I wouldn't know.
By the way, Chris, let me ask you. I've been wanting to ask
Yeah.
you this. Am I the only guest that you've had on with a funny accent?
No, I've had. When you say funny accent, do you mean an American accent? I've had American
Yes.
people on my show. I love the American accent. I think it's great. Yeah.
And I love the British accent. I really I wish I can go on to like one of those apps and learn how to have your accent. Oh my God.
We can practice. We can adopt. I'll try and do an American accent, not on the podcast though, because I'll probably make a mess of it. But maybe offline we can. You can mimic me, and I'll mimic you.
You got it, mate.
I mean, we've spent over an hour now, and we're kind of coming towards the end. There's so much more we can touch on. So kind of in the last sort of couple of questions, really, what has scared you and scarred you the most, or what does scare you, and what has scarred you the most?
My greatest fear is not being in a position to help the people that I love and care for.
Wow.
It's still something that is there, and I try and work through it. It's going back to my childhood and the fact that I was there for my siblings, for my parents when they were sick, and didn't
Yeah.
give it a thought. And the idea of not being there is terrifying to me.
Because this is the Purpose Led Leadership podcast. I get the sense that intention and purpose, that's your if you were to define your purpose, I guess it would be along those lines, right?
It's yes. I think that at my core, my purpose is to care and nurture for others. I've just worked really hard at making sure that's not my only purpose, because that means I'm just giving.
But I think what I'm picking up here, sorry to interrupt you slightly there,
Sure.
is that I don't think anybody can achieve that purpose unless you are serving yourself as well. I think that's the difference.
So I think that I had to open the purpose up a little more, which sounds crazy because like, why would I do more of what I'm kind of feeling like my life is, and it's kind of like narrow. But instead of just caring for the people that I love and care for and nurture them, if you were to ask me what is my life, well, you did. What is my life purpose? There's a saying. It's a Jewish concept called tikkun olam, and it literally means to repair the world. So I really believe that not just my purpose, but all of us are here in essence to repair the world in
Yeah.
whatever way that looks like to you in your life, your community, your
Mm.
family. The world needs a lot of repairing,
It does, yeah.
and it's going to take all of us. And I think if we do our part and if we make this world, and I know this sounds so frou-free and so like kumbaya, but I really truly believe if you leave the world a little bit better shape
Yes.
than when we arrived,
Yeah.
is there a greater calling than that?
Wow. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think a lot of people in this world, again, this is going to sound judgmental, and we've just talked about not being judgmental, but I think a lot of people in this world, I would say they're not alive. What I mean by that, they're going through the motions every
Yeah.
month. They're getting their paycheck. They're working for the weekend. There's no meaning behind that, and I think purpose is different. It can evolve and move and shake, but I do think it's so important to have something to strive to be and do and serve. And I think that's if you've got that, you're halfway there. What about what scarred you? What's affected you the most in your life that not as necessarily held you back, but has affected you as a human being? Do you think?
I think more than anything, loss. When you lose people
Mm,
around you, your family, your friends,
mm,
you you really get this sense of urgency that you don't put things off. So I mean, my scars tell me don't have a bucket list. Empty your bucket. My scars tell me like there is no tomorrow. Do those things that bring you joy today.
yeah,
My
yeah,
scars tell me, if I want to, don't wait till a birthday or a holiday to buy a gift and to say I love you, or don't wait
mm,
for a time to just pick up the phone and call someone and say, man,
yeah,
I'm just calling you because I was thinking about you and I want you to know I appreciate
yeah,
you, brother, because the
yeah,
scars that I kind of carry are scars that um, that time is so precious. And
mm,
but those scars show up in a good way. I carry my scars proudly because each one of those scars, each one of those losses means that
yeah,
I had something precious that to lose. I had
yes,
if it wasn't precious, they wouldn't be scars. I wouldn't be considering them a loss.
yeah. That's a really really powerful um, way of looking at it. If you don't have any scars, you haven't had anything to lose, or you haven't had any pain to go through. Without pain, you can't get joy and freedom. That's a really interesting perspective. Not that we go out looking for scars and
Yeah,
be hurt, but I think that at least you've lived if you've got scars, at least you've lived your life.
yeah, yeah. And when you lose people, um, it's sad. But you know, during my divorce, or right after my divorce, I read a quote from Dr. Seuss, and I feel like it applies for all the loss I've had in my life. And it's don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened.
Wow. Yeah.
So
When you're talking about loss, are you talking about your parents passing, or your wife not being around?
all
Is
of
there
it,
anything in
all
particular?
of it,
All
the
of it.
loss of
Yeah.
opportunity, the loss
Right.
of not.
Mm.
My friend just last week passed away, and she and I kept in contact. I actually, she was my boss. I worked
Oh,
for her.
wow.
She was the CEO and president for many years. She was an incredible, one of the best leaders I've ever had.
Yeah.
And Dana Engelhardt, she just passed away at 54 years old.
Wow.
And
Sorry to hear.
it's not just the loss of a person, but the loss of, oh, I was, I spoke with her and she left a message and I was supposed to call her, and it's been a few days and I didn't know. No one
Mm.
knew.
Mm.
It's a loss of opportunity. It's the loss of
Yes.
a unit when I was married. It's not the loss. I'm very
Yeah.
happy that I'm divorced and with someone in a very healthy, loving relationship. My kids love her. I love her. But the loss of a family, the loss of
Yeah.
20 something years, of course,
Yeah.
it's all of it.
Of course. I think as well, it's about, I'd sooner regret something I've done than something I haven't done, as in, I'd sooner I've picked up the phone and
Yeah.
said, I love you, or I think you're great, or thank you, than gone, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And that's the kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, 100%. It's kind of like, I could apologize, right? But there's certain things you can't go back. And when you have certain losses, that's where those scars sit.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. Absolutely fascinating. Kind of in closing now, we haven't really touched on the work that you do. Can you just, in a short space of time, give us an overview of what you do and what sort of problems you solve?
Sure. So besides from solving the problems of falling off a horse in foreign countries, um, I, I'm the CEO, founder, and host of Hike Your Sales Training and Community. It's a platform where companies bring their sales team to learn real sales skills, have the proper mindset and confidence to ethically sell and sell well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll have to get you back on in a year or two because there's loads more we can talk about. Just before we go, what passing thoughts, advice, or tips would you give anyone entering the entrepreneurial world, the business world, or life in general?
So when you're starting, I'm a 2-time founder, and I could be a 20-time founder, and I don't think it would ever get easier. It's the journey. It's not about having the answers. It's about always do what's right. And if you do the right things, you can't go wrong. In the long run, you cannot do wrong by doing right. And
Yeah.
just kindness, intentionality, so
Yes.
important. Do things with purpose, and try and do things that help repair the world, even if it's one person at a time. You don't have to create the next the next biggest thing in the world. You don't need to create the cure for cancer. That'd be great if you did, but if you create a business and you're able to employ one person and help them with their their livelihood, if you're able to help them grow and develop, think about what you just did for a human being.
I think that's a beautiful way to end, and a statement that everybody will get behind. So, Seth, mate, thank you so much for coming on the show. Absolute pleasure.
It's my pleasure. And Chris, you are enough. I want you to put that next time I see behind you, a big sign, you are enough.
Can you do it in an English accent? I'll do mine in an American one.
All right, mate, you are enough. You are more than enough. You are bloody enough.
I can only say, do you want fries with that? But that's not a really, it's a strange way to end the podcast. We'll end it there, I think.
Fries. Wow.
I don't know why I said that.
Well, there's an ongoing joke between the fries versus chips, but
yeah. Great to have you on, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me, Chris.
The Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast is sponsored by Orca Pay Group. We've chosen to partner with Orca Group because they are an umbrella and payroll company that leads with trust and transparency. They cultivate enduring partnerships with sustainable growth. They aspire to live in a world where umbrella and payroll companies are trusted, where confidence is earned and transparency is essential. They operate as strategic partners for growth. They are pioneers of exceptional service, and they put their recruitment agency partners and their contractor experience at the heart of everything they do.